This episode of the Aquarius Podcast is sponsored by Aquarium Co-op and their amazing all-in-one fertilizer, Easy Green. If you're like me and love planted tanks but weren't born with an aquatic green thumb, Easy Green is the stuff for you. Easy Green is super easy to dose, and I use it in all of my planted tanks, both high and low-tech setups. I follow the instructions on the bottle, and the results are healthy, vibrant plants. I know so many other aquarists who swear by Easy Green and their tanks look amazing. You can even go back to previous episodes of this podcast where you hear several guests talk about their experience and love for this stuff. So head on over to aquariumcoop.com, drop some Easy Green in your cart, and use the code Aquarius5 at checkout to receive 5% off your order. And if you needed it, Corey has numerous videos on the Aquarium Co-op YouTube channel where he talks all about Easy Green, how to use it, and shows off his own tanks at home and in the store that are thriving on the stuff. Lastly, if you're enjoying the podcast, share the show with your friends, leave a rating wherever you listen to the episodes, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Now, on to the interview. Today's date is Saturday, October 20th, 2018. My guest today is Rack Cross, and this is a special episode. We are live at the Aquatic Experience 2018 in Secaucus, New Jersey, and we're actually in my hotel room at the Embassy Suites by Hilton, a wonderful establishment, beautiful lobby, and I've tricked this fine gentleman into coming into my room, a complete stranger, and he's actually drinking a drink that I poured him, so hey, you know, he trusts me, and we're going to talk about...
Randy, this is the nicest studio I've ever been invited to.
You're welcome. Actually, we are using a new recorder, so, you know, I did invest back, you know, I'm investing back into the show, and I've got a nice new recorder that you're talking into, so this is kind of an on-the-road mobile studio, and I don't get to do in-person interviews very often. The nice thing is we're not in a fish room right now, so there's hopefully, you know, really good, you know, no background noise.
No air bubbles, right?
You don't hear the bubblers, so hopefully my post-production editing, it's not going to be too intense, but Mr. Rack Cross, I completely forgot to hit you with the bio. So listeners, Mr. Rack Cross, he's the VP of the Tennessee Ornithological Society. He's been a chairman of the International Amphibian Days. He is the founding president of a local nature club in his area. He's from the beautiful part of the country, the East Tennessee Mountains, right?
Correct.
That general
That's
region.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So I've seen pictures, absolutely beautiful and astounding, and there's some really cool, you know, native fish and native birds and all sorts of other critters that live in that area. So very cool to have Rack on. He's also got a fledgling, dare I say, and don't take that in the wrong way, but YouTube channel called The River Life, and we'll definitely make sure we get a chance at the end of this to give Rack an opportunity to kind of talk about what that is as we wrap up this interview. But let's go ahead and go back and talk about. First off, Aquatic Experience, man. What are you thinking?
This is crazy. It's overwhelming. I mean, so many people, so many things going on. I love the aquascaping, the competition that's going on. Every time I walk by there, it's a different view of beautiful aquariums being scaped. So it's wonderful to see the people. Fantastic to meet you here in person, Randy. I enjoy what you're doing, and I guess our paths intersected when you interviewed Corey McElroy of Aquarium Co-op.
Yeah, I've heard of him. And I've heard of this story.
Because of him, I heard of you, and now I'm a fan of yours. So thank you very much for inviting me on your show.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an absolute pleasure, and you know, doing weekly interviews. It's fun to be able to, you know, have a lightweight kind of media outlet where it's very easy to meet people and just say, hey, tell me your story. Let's bring it to the audience and let hobbyists and other fish nerds, or you know, as people will hear in this conversation, kind of amphibian nerds, hear, you know, just two people geek out on a topic. So, you know, I'm always on the lookout for people, and so thank you very much for coming
absolutely.
on.
It's a great time for me.
Yeah, and so Aquatic Experience, this is your second?
Second.
This is your second?
I went to Chicago last year.
This is my first. It's an absolutely fantastic event. You know,
it really is.
we broke away for a little bit. It's lunchtime right now on day 2, so it's Saturday. You know, we're going to do maybe a 30-minute interview, and then Rack and I are both going to head back and have some good times. And maybe there's a second victim I can convince to come up here. But, you know, hey, it's I'd be remiss to not take up an opportunity to interview somebody here at the Aquatic Experience. Just the buzz is in the air, and I would really encourage everybody out there to, you know, Aquatic Experience 2019, the shrimp competition, the aquascaping, the vendors, seeing all the new products. meeting maybe your favorite YouTuber. It's such a cool event. If you are a nerd, I mean, first off, you're a nerd because you're listening to this podcast. And so when you're in that vein, you should also try to come to this event. Really cool. I'm pretty sure it will be here in Secaucus, New Jersey again next year.
That's true.
Who knows how many years it will be here, and then maybe move to a different venue. But again, I would strongly encourage. It's an absolute blast. Check out all the social media postings.
Speaking of that, Randy, it's been a leap year forward for social media and the aquatic experience. The host organization, World Pet Association, donated this year 3 booth spaces to YouTubers. And last year, the YouTubers, they weren't on the agenda. We weren't even on the map. But they saw all the hype videos and the live streams and the videos that came out afterward. And this year they extended like a red carpet welcoming.
Yeah.
So
they're smart. They're smart.
I think so. Let's continue to grow with support. Let's continue to grow the effort to welcome social media at large events.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Rex. So enough about everybody else, man. Let's focus on you. This is your 30 minutes that I'm focused in on you, my man. I want to give you all the attention. So give me your tropical fish keeping background. When did you first start keeping tanks?
That's a great question. My earliest childhood memory of pet keeping involved a guppy bowl. And my mom had a small colony of wild guppies. And she loved them. And I was fascinated as a kid, 3-4-year-old, watching my mom take the mom guppy out of the bowl and putting it into a jar and watching the fry drop. I knew it was something special, to occupy my mom's full attention that way.
Yeah, so I'm sorry to interrupt you, but there it is again, man. Somebody gets their passion, gets their start with guppies and watching guppies reproduce, man. That is just, time and time again, that is a such a constant in this hobby. And if you're somebody, myself included, that wants to get a younger generation involved, those live bears and that magic of creation and birth.
I agree.
Continue, my man.
And I'm not over it. I mean, I've kept an aquarium and fish nearly my entire life. I took a break while I was in the Army. They wouldn't let me bring my aquarium, and a college dorm or two, no fish allowed. But other than that, fish have always been a constant in my life, and I still love guppies. Yeah, so that's cool. And then, the guppy colony grew, the fish bowl got bigger, and that eventually became something I was interested in. And for my 8th birthday, I got my first 10-gallon aquarium, incredibly overstocked 10-gallon community tank.
Of course.
But it came with some education opportunity. My mother also bought some books. I love to read. So I was into fish. I was always going to be a fish keeper. I loved it. But it also spawned an appreciation for nature in general. So there was a creek in my neighborhood, and if I weren't at home and weather permitting, I was in the creek, and I was turning over rocks looking for crustaceans and salamanders and fish.
Nice. So did you bring any home, and did you set up any like terrariums or bowls or anything for those critters?
Not well, but yes. So I didn't actually get a nature appreciation mentor. So I was kind of doing some things just that a kid would do. I remember going on a salamander collecting trip once and putting the salamanders I had captured in a jar. And you know how kids are. We don't really keep our schedule. This was pre-smartphone days. And baseball practice snuck up on me, and I forgot and left the jar of salamanders in my dad's car.
Oh, no.
He was a salesman and traveled, and noticed the next day an odor in the car.
Oh, poor thing.
Yes, so I didn't do well with the salamanders. And then my dad became not a fan of salamanders.
Yeah.
So it was difficult to keep, and I just learned to better appreciate them in nature, leave them in situ.
Yeah, and now to go back, were you born and raised in East Tennessee?
Southwest Virginia, East Tennessee, always there in the mountain southern Appalachians.
Can you go back in the Wayback Time Machine, close your eyes, and kind of tell me what the fish stores were like back then, like selection wise? Was it something that from a price point perspective things were expensive relative to now? Like what do you remember your experiences as
tropical fish seem to be more expensive. They seem to be more accessible now. One of the things I remember is that we upgraded my 10-gallon tank to a 29-gallon tank and bought one of the first hang-on back filters. It was a Dynaflow filter, and this thing had like 70 parts. And it was 2 days to clean. Oh,
wow.
But it was automatic. We're doing the hang-on back thing, and that was a really cool thing to have, and it was super expensive.
Yeah.
So now to have the hang-on back technology that we're kind of over, but it's very inexpensive. Every starter kit comes with a hang-on back. It's fun to remember.
Yeah.
Hey, wow, that was the technology at the time, and it replaced, I guess, the floss box filter, the air filter that sat in the corner and wasn't very decorative.
But there's a lot of people going back to that, though.
Because it's so effective. That's.
I know Greg Sage, Select Aquatics, was a guest on this show. He's very, very, high on the box filters, and his take being that, you put your media in there, your filter floss, whatever it may be, and you can actually watch as it needs to be changed. Where the other black sponge filters, very good filtration, very efficient, but you don't really know when they need to be changed, and maybe you never clean. And when I say changed, I mean maintenance and cleaned. So yeah, box filters.
Well, I think there's some human nature involved there. We want what we don't have, and that drives the market. Yeah. So how many times do vintage items in any genre come back with a bang?
One of the things I want to do is go back and compare the price of the glass aquariums, back then to like the $1 a gallon sale at Petco. And
crazy.
Did we have any sales back then that even compared to the $1 a gallon sale that Petco
Not that
does?
I'm aware of. We were buying the Metaframe steel frame aquariums. You're buying a heavy duty unit, slate bottoms, and it was not an inexpensive opportunity.
Yeah.
So, but I think I may have been motivated to take better care of my first aquarium, knowing that my parents had sacrificed so that I could enjoy it.
Yeah, it almost you're almost in the furniture price point, right? Where
I think so.
This is a significant investment. Where now we just kind of. I'm drilling overflows for my fish room right now, and I busted 2 10-gallons, and I was honestly more upset that they were already painted 10 gallons, right? So I love doing black bottoms, black tops, black sides, black backs. And so I was more upset that it was the time that I invested to paint those tanks as opposed to the $10 that each one cost.
Nearly disposable.
Right? Yeah. So I mean, I would assume then we've come a long way as far as accessibility into the hobby and price point.
Which is great for the consumer and the hobby, I think. Yeah.
I mean, the more accessible, the more people that are going to be able to enter.
Exactly.
So what does your progression through the hobby look like then? So you started with kind of your guppies, and then you got a community tank. Was there anything in particular that you remember in the community tank that was like an outstanding favorite of yours? And did you kind of go through waves in the hobby of, I'm a cichlid guy right now, and I'm all about angelfish, and then all of a sudden you switched over to bettas, or do you have any kind of
So the angelfish were not common. When you saw an angelfish, it was a wow show-stopping fish, and they were very expensive. So after I'd upgraded my 10-gallon aquarium, I wanted angelfish, and I bought 2 dime-sized baby angelfish.
I guessed. I just said angelfish, too, and it happened to be right on the money.
You nailed it.
All right. Excellent.
And these things grew, to 6-7-inch fish, but I couldn't stay out of that creek, And so I would go down there and I would catch different types of minnows and suckers, and I would bring them back and temporarily introduce them to the community tank.
And how did that work out?
So they're more of a cold water fish.
Right.
So I would leave them in there for observation, and then I would recognize maybe a little bit of stress, and I would take them back to the creek and release them. But I never had any water quality issues or parasite issues, although that could have easily happened, and I don't recommend anyone try this.
Hence my curiosity on that, yeah.
But I was just a kid enjoying nature, and that's what I did, and it was pretty phenomenal. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then my Plecostomus grew, also from 3 inches to 9 inches or whatever, and then I didn't need to go to the creek for the game fish anymore.
Yeah. There you go. So let's fast forward now. What does your current fish aquarium setup look like?
Yeah, so I was not doing fish for a while, other than little hobby bowls. I do some artwork, and I did a show involving goldfish bowls and live goldfish, and didn't have a large aquarium at home, but I started a YouTube channel after I retired from my career, and decided that I wanted to do fish keeping content. Basically because I'd seen a couple of YouTube channels where I really appreciated the creators' take on the hobby and the community. So I wanted to be a part of this community that was growing, something I could give back to and I could receive from. We have family to share with. And then so many avenues of instruction and opportunity, like your podcast. It's like, hey, we're going to get the nerds together. We're going to talk about things we like to talk about, and everybody's going to have a takeaway.
Yep.
So I believe, my personal philosophy is everyone has something. And if we just take a minute to listen to someone's story and find out what that is, and the fish keeping community is really good about allowing everyone to bring their something, put it on a buffet of options, if you will, and then coaching each other. Hey, if you don't want that, just leave it alone. You don't have to spit on it. It may be what the next guy wants. Mm-hmm. So I think that's an overwhelming sense of what we call the hashtag fish fam.
Yeah.
And we're seeing a lot of that with the Aquatic Experience YouTube booth going on right now.
Yeah, there's a big, kind of different strokes for different folks. I think every once in a while you will get some bad apples that, like to poo-poo and hate on things. But, something like a bicher, I can appreciate that fish. I'll probably never have a tank that has them,
right.
But that's a cool fish, man. And if somebody, if that's your passion thing or something you like to keep, by all means. And talking with Shelby Bush from Seegers Farms, I was blown away that people would keep sturgeon.
Yes.
And there's actually a sturgeon display tank that Aquatic Experience has set up.
Striking.
And it's like their prehistoric tank, and those suckers are super active, man. And I'm like, man, looking at this thing, I could definitely see the appeal in that. I would never keep them, but I can appreciate the unique coolness that fish brings to the hobby and the joy, right? The joy in fish keeping.
I like what you're saying there. And we just give each other room to be each other. You be you, tank your tank.
Most of the time we do.
And then we can also offer some coaching when asked. Here's some best practices I'm aware of for your consideration.
Yeah. So what are your tanks like at home right now?
Yeah, so I started the YouTube channel, and I went. I started 3 small tanks. I had a scarlet batis and a betta, and another small container fish. And my wife came home and didn't yell at me. She said, "You had a good day today, didn't you, honey?"
What size tanks are these?
2 or 3 gallon.
Okay.
Yeah, and I said, yeah, and I set them up in the foyer of the home, and kind of a neat, artistic-looking, cool display. And I was working it just to get a reaction. It went over okay, and I'm like, I think I want to get an aquarium. And so that was just like multi-tank syndrome.
There you go.
Ready to pop. And so I started buying tanks, watching Corey's videos over there at Aquarium Co-op. He made it look so easy. So I'm building racks and filling them up, and I escalated to about 24 aquariums in a portion of the house we just turned into a fish room.
Excellent. So let's talk about those 24 aquariums.
Yeah.
What size? What do you have?
Oh, they ranged.
Okay.
I kept a 5.5 gallon for the betta. And then a 40-gallon glass tank was the largest. I had a 75-gallon stock tank. I put some baby koi in. A couple of 20-gallon longs. Also a big fan of Flip Aquatics. And I'd bought some shrimp from Rob at Flip Aquatics. And I hate to say this, I love them to death. I fell in love also with Malaysian driftwood. And come to find out, if you overstock your tank with Malaysian driftwood, you can escalate some parameters you really don't want to escalate.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. So now that's a beautiful rabbit snail tank.
So tell you what, you package those rabbit snails up and you send them to me, because I've got my Shodentai puffer Poe that he's making me. I'm gonna have to ramp up in the fish room once it gets fully up and running, and dedicate maybe 2 tanks to snail production, because Poe is a fatty.
That's an awesome puffer to have.
He's amazing, man.
Yeah.
I can't recommend those fish enough, and it seems like they're becoming more and more available too.
And they should be. They're a great fish for the hobby. I actually received a couple of the pea puffers by mistake. I ordered a pair of guppies online, and they shipped the wrong box to my address, and it had pea puffers in it. So I kept those guys for a while. They ate me out of snails. Yeah, while I had them. But they had a lot of personality. I enjoyed keeping the puffers.
Yeah. Let's talk about the shrimp, right? So what has surprised you the most with keeping shrimp?
So the shrimp require a little bit of effort. Like, I had a bulletproof aquarium system where I would overload it with plants, and that would just kind of help me to stay within, a balance, even if I made some mistakes or was lazy on the maintenance. The shrimp, their parameters were a little more exacting. So I thought I was doing everything. I had the setup, I had the maintenance, but I didn't count on the decor changing the parameters and them being sensitive to it. But I kept poison dart frogs for years, and I thought the shrimp are very similar. Now, they'll do very well if you know a few of these particulars, you're going to have a great experience with shrimp. And I'm going to go back into shrimp. I'm talking to Rob here this weekend. We're going to give it another go. He's promised to be my coach, my better conscience. So I'm going to do those those shrimp one more time, and even if I have to, I'm an artist, as I mentioned. If I have to sacrifice the aesthetics, I'm going to do what's right for the shrimp, and I'm going to enjoy them. But I tell you, one of the things that surprises me is how popular they are. I talked to Chris Lukop, the Shrimp King is here. He's running the shrimp contest, the International Shrimp Contest. It's grown since last year. Big question mark, we're moving this major convention. Are the people going to show up in New Jersey? Well, the shrimp contest just went ahead and grew. The shrimpers, they don't care where you're going. We're here, and we're growing.
Yeah, and I've shared the anecdote that on my bus ride over from Manhattan to Secaucus, New Jersey, real quick bus ride, but I had no idea where I was going. I've never been in this area before, and so the bus driver, I was like, is this the correct bus that I should be on? He's like, oh, yeah, are you going to that aquatic fish thing? I'm like, well, actually,
wow.
Yes, I am.
Wow.
And he's like, oh, are they going to have shrimp and bettis there? And I'm like, well, they will, and I'm pretty sure there will be a bunch for sale. And he's like, oh, great. And so this is somebody that, had this experience not moved to a different location, individuals like that, right?
Right.
Kind of maybe they don't have full-on multiple tank syndrome, but they're an aquarist in their own right, wouldn't have a chance to experience this awesome event. So that's just a fun anecdote that I've shared that even my bus driver,
good. Yeah.
Was jazzed about this event, and I'm sure he's probably here today with his family walking around, and hopefully they pick up some shrimp and some.
It's all about the aquarium. I don't care where you go.
Yeah, so let's pivot now, and we're going to go in a little bit of a different direction. We're not going to talk about saltwater. We're going to talk about dart frogs.
Oh yeah.
And I don't keep dart frogs. I'm even scared to talk to you about this because I don't want to get hyped up and go down that rabbit hole. But I think
careful.
I think it's a very easy bridge and transition for people that have an aquarium to also keep dart frogs. I've talked to a number of people here that actually also have dart frogs. They have the paludariums or whatever type of enclosure, and they have this fond passion for dart frogs. So we're going to have a little mini dart frog conversation.
Sure. Oh,
I'm going to ask you a lot of beginner, basic, for an advanced dart frog person, they're going to say you're a noob.
Well, that's fine.
Absolutely. Full disclaimer. Full disclaimer. Everybody knows that listens to this. I don't have all the answers, and
well, truth in advertising. I don't have any dart frogs currently. I haven't kept dart frogs since 2000.
But you have some serious chops, though.
Absolutely.
Okay,
yeah.
So
I talk to some really smart people, just like we're doing here. We're networking with all the speakers and so forth.
Yeah. So let's give a quick overview. Let's fly by how you got started in keeping dart frogs.
It's total eye candy. And you see a picture of a dart frog, and it's like, wow, that is awesome. I like to have that in a nice-looking terrarium. And so started doing some research and found that there was an eye surgeon in the area that had in his lobby a terrarium that had dart frogs in it. And so I gave his office a call. He was kind enough to give me a call back, and he said, yeah, I'm going up to Baltimore, and there's going to be a reptile show with some vendors with dart frogs. If you want me to get you some, I'm going to pick up some more. I'll be happy to pick you up some. And I said, well, I don't know if I can care for them properly or not. I'm kind of new on the learning curve. And he said, I'll help you, and I'll get a couple of frogs for you can keep in a 10-gallon aquarium. So being a fish guy, I'm like, I'm set. Bring those frogs down here. So that was the beginning.
And what year was this?
That would have been late 90s.
Okay.
96, 97.
Okay. And so, I mean, what were those first dart frogs? What were your lessons learned? Like, kind of walk me through a high level of that experience with that first.
Fortunately for me, the frog that I found the prettiest was one of the easiest to care for. And
that being?
The Dendrobates azureus.
Okay.
Which now we found out that it's not its own species. It's just a subspecies of the Dendrobates tinctorius, azureus subspecies. And it's the solid blue frog with black spots on its back. What we would consider one of the larger terrestrial type frogs versus the smaller arboreal ones.
Okay, and then, so let's go ahead and right now have the Randy's going to ask you a silly question, and you're going to give me the educated answer. Why would I want to keep something that is poisonous and can make me sick?
Awesome question. These frogs are typically captive bred, not wild imports. And in the pet trade, at least in my state, it's illegal to have a venomous reptile or amphibian. So they're all captive bred in Tennessee.
And what does that mean?
That means they haven't been exposed to the wild diet, which changes their metabolism and the way that they chemically process their food into the mucus on their back that helps them breathe. So they're not poisonous, but they're still an amphibian. I wouldn't recommend anyone handle an amphibian and then wipe their eyes, or put the frog in their mouth for whatever reason.
Yeah, so just any standard native North American amphibian, toad,
Sure.
frog, same kind of handling practices,
There you go.
right?
Yeah.
Okay. And so I've asked that question to some other dart frog people, and they're like, "Well, you don't go around handling your fish." And I
That's
say,
true.
Touche.
Yeah, they're more for observation than handling. And when I would move my frogs, I would do it with clear tubes, not fingers. And if it were necessary, I'd put on a glove and make sure it was very wet.
And why do you do the clear tube? What is does
Just
it keep it in place or what?
Yeah, it was someone figured this out. I don't know if it was trial and error or what, but if you'll hold a tube over a frog, it naturally wants to climb. The Dendrobates Latin name, that's kind of like a tree or woody climber. They're a tree frog. So instead of hopping away, usually they just climb up the tube, and then they'd be still. You could move them from one, and then lay the tube down. They'd crawl out when they wanted to.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And so, what were some of the other observations or things that kind of surprised you about keeping the dart frogs?
That they developed personality. You know how fish worship the food god. They get in the habit of seeing this guy with the food coming down, and they just come up to the tank and check you out. Frogs did the same thing. It was crazy. And they'd kind of circle up. They all wanted a little elbow room at the table. So they'd have a little powwow in the center of the moss and the terrarium that you're keeping them in. Then you drop in the fruit flies, which is the staple food. And then you could hear them snap when they would put their tongue out to grab the fruit fly and then retract it into their mouth very quickly. Mm-hmm. So very social. And they were good in a group together, kind of like a school of fish. A group of frogs were really cool to watch.
And so, now you've developed this passion, you've had this experience. So then, how does it progress for you then to the point where, you're the chairman of International Amphibian Day and all the other...
that was a total farce. So I love frogs. I'm very passionate about frogs, and I networked with all the people. I wanted the good information, had the good conversations, met the right people. And there were people far more qualified to be chairman of International Amphibian Day than I was, but probably no more passionate. And so we on the board that I chaired, we had people from U.S. State Department, Smithsonian, National Aquarium, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, USGS, this high-powered National Park Service, people that cared about amphibians. And we had a project. We wanted to. There was a pretty serious disease cropping up in the wild and in collections called chytrid, and we put all of our resources toward that. Figured out what it was, how to stop it, how to correct it, so it didn't wipe out our collections. That was our contribution, to amphibian keeping. And what we did that I think was very smart, and how I got involved, is we invited the hobbyist in, and we said, "Hey, hobbyist, how are you doing this?" And talk about a radical group of hobbyists. Poison dart frogs 20 years ago, this was an anomaly. How in the world do you get poison dart frogs into the United States if you're not a zoo? So these hardcore hobbyists that had poison dart frogs had figured something out, because you only keep a dart frog wrong for a little while. And these hobbyists were keeping them generation after generation. Come to find out, the hobbyists had figured out some caretaking tips that were adopted after International Amphibian Days, and we started doing behind-the-scene tours of national collections. They started adopting techniques that the hobbyists were using, and then educating the hobbyists on why this is working.
So what are some of those things that we learned, that we shared, that were to make a successful dart frog keeper?
Yeah, excellent question, and that plays right into the very simple setup that works. Rather than, if you go to the natural habitat, the biome, you see a frog, it's jumping around in the leaf litter on the ground. So you go home, you make a terrarium with dirt and leaf litter on it.
But leaves matter, though. So what kind of leaves? At least in the aquariums, the type of leaf that you put in there for tannins matter, right?
Not so much.
Not so much for the frogs?
If you're going to use leaves, people usually go to the ones that's going to last longer, that don't break down as quickly because of a very moist environment. So where I'm from, the magnolia leaf was awesome.
Okay.
It's a heavy, waxy leaf. The frogs liked it. It would hold water if it were turned the right way. Good for the humidity. They could even use it as an egg laying. Anyway, but what the zoos were doing, they were recreating exactly the environment the frogs came from, but in captivity, the frogs weren't doing well. When when you put that dirt and that leaf litter in an aquarium and then you keep it saturated, you get all kinds of growth that you don't want, that are harmful to the frogs. And what the hobbyists had figured out is they would elevate with a false bottom a moss bed, usually a sphagnum moss, a wet type of moss, and then let the water pass through so that the moss was keeping the humidity up, but it wasn't standing water on dirt. And as that water passed through, that was the maintenance. You'd eventually have to drain some water. Misting, very important. So 10-gallon aquarium, false bottom, moss, sphagnum moss, and we used a hand pump that was common when kerosene heaters were used. And you'd transfer your kerosene from the container you took to the store to your home unit. And we'd have one for aquarium to prevent cross-contamination. Jab that thing in a corner, pump out some water, and you're good to go for 2 weeks. So that was the specialty equipment, and that was it. And so the zoos saw this, and they said, really? This is what you're doing? That's what I'm doing. And I'm getting, the frogs are laying every 7 to 10 days eggs.
And so what does the rest of the tank look like? Because we see, we always see these beautiful paludariums and terrariums that have these wonderful orchid walls. Is that critical?
That is not critical, but it is beautiful.
Because that's intimidating, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Like when you see those, it's like, man, that is amazing.
I could never do that.
I could never do. Yes, that is a true statement. Randy is not equipped to build that kind of thing.
That looks expensive, and I'm not going to throw that kind of money away. Yeah, so this 10-gallon, very, very inexpensive. You could put a bromeliad, okay? That's the type of plant that's very common in the rainforest. It grows epiphytically on other plants, so it doesn't draw any nutrients. It's not a parasite, it's an epiphyte. And it is very waxy and holds water in the cups of the leaves. So this is important in the dart frog world, so they can get wet if they want to, lay eggs in standing water. But it's not necessary. You could use, one of the most prolific breeders of dart frogs that I ever met used a Cool Whip plastic tub turned upside down with a little doorway cut in it for the frogs to go in. It's a little hiding place on top of moss, and then a plastic lid with whatever light was available. That simple. And I guess one thing that I haven't explained is the false bottom covers 80% of the bottom. And then I used a material that I think is common in cross stitching. It's a perforated plastic sheet that sits on top of the false bottom and then dips down to the floor of the aquarium for that other 20% with a rock on top of it to keep it in place. So there's standing water on the end of the aquarium. And that's it. And then you can make it as pretty as or ornate as you'd like.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So very, very simple setup to be
very
successful,
inexpensive.
Now, for as far as the top goes, screen top, or are we doing a solid top to keep the humidity in?
That's right.
Okay.
The solid top. I was buying sheets that go in to cover fluorescent lights and just cutting them to size.
Okay.
Yeah, and then I would lift that and spray. I'd use a little hand pump power sprayer to spray the aquarium down, and that's not even necessary. It's recommended, especially if you want to breed the frogs.
So let's say somebody ends up being successful, right? What is an outlet for the frogs? So I guess my first question would be, what's kind of the max, inch of fish per gallon? What's like kind of the dart frog rule? How many of them can I have in a 10-gallon? And then once they start being successful and making babies, like what's a good outlet for dart frogs? Like,
there's so many questions when you look at your process, how you're going to do it. I never kept more than a trio of adults in a 10-gallon aquarium for the purpose of breeding. And then I usually would cut that back to a pair. I would figure out who the pair was and then remove, the third wheel. And I would draw eggs every 7 to 10 days in a petri dish and just stack the petri dishes. And then as the eggs would hatch, I'd move the tadpoles into a shoebox size stir-light container. Mm-hmm. And I used to do a lot of water maintenance on those until I figured out if you'll use leaf litter and just let the water get tannin rich, the frogs, all you have to do is add water and feed and put some springtails in there, and some fish flake food. Not much. And then as the tadpoles develop, take them out and put them into another aquarium. I used a 20-gallon long. And the frogs come out, of course, much smaller than the adults, okay, so they don't need as much space. 20-gallon long with the false bottom like we've described. The baby frogs, oh gosh, you could keep 50 in there. But I had at the time dart frogs non-existent. I was shipping, 50 at a time. How many do you have? I want them all. And a lot of them then were going to educational institutions and zoos. So now I think any pet store would be interested in having frogs. Back in 2000, we were very leery of selling to local pet stores because we didn't think that the education was there for the frogs to have good care when they left the store.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, but I think that's changing now. And, I notice here at the aquarium experience that so many of the displays, the most beautiful displays, involve not just a box of water, but marginal plants growing above the surface of the water and even living walls behind the aquarium, kind of, saying, hey, maybe the industry is going toward this vivarium, terrarium, paludarium, that make the whole ecosystem, instead of just the aquatic life.
Yeah, I mean, they're amazing, right? These setups are just
I'm sure your listeners
astounding.
are familiar with ADA.
Yeah.
And the ADA exhibit, which is really unbelievable, it's fascinating. 2 of the 3 display tanks that they have running include living walls of above surface plants.
No, hold on, AGA?
No, ADA.
Oh, who's ADA?
That's the Amano design.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Takashi Amano.
Yes.
The boutique,
Yep. No, their setup is amazing. Yeah, definitely. There's so many acronyms of clubs.
And AGA just happens to be the booth next door. Yeah, I can see where
everybody has a 3 or 4 letter acronym, and I was like, I think you mean AGA, American the Aquatic Gardeners Association.
Yeah.
But no, yes, ADA. Excellent. And that's, once again, if you come to the Aquatic Experience, you can see their setup and just the amazing setups that they have and products that they sell. So now, I guess going back to the 10-gallon, if I don't want to breed, can I have like 5 or 6 poison dart frogs, and then they would just kind of predate on the eggs and be okay in a group? Or
I probably wouldn't recommend that many. I mean, once you see the size and the scale of a full-grown terrestrial poison dart frog, you can see where 5 would be crowded.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, although I don't think the frogs would mind if they're well fed and you're keeping the water parameters okay, which fish keepers are the best dart frog keepers. They're already aware of, hey, maybe I could improve the water. But if you'll do the moss as the mist that you're misting every day passes through the moss, man, it does a lot of water correction. Mm-hmm. And then we also learned to use pothos, kind of grows like a vine. Just cut a hole through the moss and stick the stem in the water under the false bottom. And that plant has such a large bore root, it's fantastic at absorbing the nitrates. And in a frog tank where you're kind of flushing the waste through the moss, the plant takes off. And another plant, the purple wandering Jew, I think is the common name, makes a gorgeous tank. It looks like it's intentionally planted, but really it's just the pothos and the wandering Jew just going crazy in an environment that they love. Throw a bromeliad in there, and it's like, hey, you know what? I might be ready to tackle that living wall.
Mm-hmm. And now let's say, so, thank you very much for kind of breaking down your experience with poison dart frog and a good beginner setup and some, hard learned lessons to be successful. What if somebody listening to this is like, you know what? I think I do want to get into poison dart frogs. What would be one good resource online that you would say, check out this website, check out this group?
Yeah,
to get
first
more
of all, you got to go to YouTube. It's the second largest search engine on the planet, and you're going to find lots of information there. And I would also say kind of write down a few of the most burning questions you have. I don't understand this part, and search in particular for that part. And I think you'll come up pretty quickly with some best practices. And also, larger zoos and national collections are a good resource. They may not be able to get back to you very quickly, but if you want good information, you can contact via email, usually from their website, the National Collection, National Aquarium, National Zoo, things of that nature. They'll give you some feedback. I know even in Tennessee, I think the Tennessee Aquarium now has a poison dart frog display. And not that they're indigenous, but it's a wonderful contrast of environments.
Yeah. No, very cool. All right, and so, to kind of wrap this up, thank you very much again for coming on and sacrificing some of your aquatic experience time. You're not from New Jersey, so you flew out here, but you're sacrificing some time to talk to me, and through this medium to the audience and share that wonderful wisdom. How can people find out more about you? Let us. Give me, a minute or two on your channel, and
Sure.
We'll make sure we've got show links in the notes for people.
Well, thank you very much, Randy. That's very generous. And as you can tell, I'm still a naturalist, a generalist. So I dig keeping fish. I love bird watching, fishing. I like to fish as a hobby. And so I did this YouTube channel kind of from the perspective of a nature appreciator, and it's called River Life. I live on the river there in Tennessee, and just wonderful, to have coffee on the porch and see a bald eagle fly down the river, or catch a fish, and the otters swim by, and then you can see a fish breaking water. We have trout and bass and carp. So the content that I wanted to share with people is the content that makes me happy. I feel like it's a quality of life enrichment. So I wanted to capture that and share it with others. And this isn't new to me. Since I was a kid, this has been a truth. And we refer to each other as nerds, just so like-minded. These people really get it and appreciate it. But I think many people, it could be an invitation. Hey, why don't you check out some nature appreciation? Oh, you know what? I really like that fish keeping. So I wanted the river life to not only be an expression, but I also wanted it to be an invitation. So very happy to invite all of your listeners over to the River Life YouTube channel. It's a small channel. It's a new channel. I've got about 740 subs, and all of a sudden, it's important to me to reach 1,000 subs. I don't know what that drive is, but this is a milestone that other creators say, yeah, if that's the toughest part. If you can hang in there and just do your content, pull your time till you get 1,000 subs, then you can just focus more on the content instead of kind of making a place for yourself at the table.
Yeah, and I liked sharing the background, and having you talk about the poison dart frogs and your experience of the hobby, so that my listeners know that you've got street cred, right? You've got some serious chops, and
I'm an old guy.
Yeah. You're an old soul. So you are somebody that they can look to and have some really good knowledgeable information, and then it comes from somebody with a lot of experience. So to me, that's very, very important in terms of when I promote somebody that, especially that does video type of content. So again, thank you very much for coming on the show. And
such a pleasure.
Yeah, awesome, man. And so listeners, we're going to head back to the Aquatic Experience. Fantastic time. I can't suggest and recommend this enough. 2019, make plans to get to Secaucus, New Jersey for Aquatic Experience, and I'm going to do my best to make it 2 years in a row. So awesome. Again, Rack, thank you very much. We'll have links to your YouTube channel in the show notes, and I am now a less ignorant person about dart frogs than before we started this conversation. So thank you very much, sir. I appreciate it.
Let's go find you some dart frogs.
I don't know. It's a fish room. I don't know if there's any. It's all planned out, man. I don't know if there's room for a dart frog in there or not. But maybe one day though. They're cool, man. They're cool.
You're cool, Randy. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you again for listening to the Aquarius Podcast. As always, get involved in your local fish club, help grow this wonderful hobby, and have fun with other fish nerds.